TomoNews presents Passport Fails.
Brit denied entry into Thailand after using her passport as toilet paper. An apparently well-traveled British national says she was denied entry into Thailand last month after making what's probably the dumbest passport-related mistake we've ever heard of. Faye Wilson had been attempting to make her way to the Southeast Asian nation from Australia, but was stopped by immigration officials who were curious as to why her passport was missing several pages. The embarrassed 28-year-old hairdresser was refused entry into the country after lying to Thai authorities, telling them she'd lost the pages. Why lie? Well, because her actual excuse would have no doubt appeared piss poor. Wilson says that during a drunken night out a few years back, she found herself lacking toilet paper. So she reached for the only paper she had at the time, that is, that attached to her passport. Ripping out 2 to 3 pages saved her from any undue embarrassment that night, but it caused some serious problems down the road. Thai immigration officials sent her packing back to the UK via Dubai, presumably at some serious expense. The 28-year-old eventually made her way back to Thailand to reunite with the friends she so abruptly left behind, but she no doubt learned one hell of a lesson.
New Zealand passport system unable to detect Asian man's eyes. 22-year-old aerospace engineering student and DJ Richard Lee was born in Taiwan but raised in New Zealand. He holds a valid New Zealand passport. Unfortunately, when it came time to renew his passport on December 6th, he had a wee bit of trouble with the government's online portal. Lee's passport photos looked fine by most human standards, but when he tried to upload them onto the New Zealand government website, they didn't take. The reason? The system could not detect his eyes. Lee attempted to submit the photos 2 more times, but again and again, the automated system responded with, "Subject's eyes are closed." When he contacted Internal Affairs to find out what the real reason was, he was told uneven lighting on the face caused his photo to be rejected. Okay? Well, finding humor in the failures of the system's facial recognition technology, Lee decided to have a little fun and used a Snapchat filter to add some absurdity to point out the website's gaffe. Think he made his point? After retaking his photos and making sure to keep his eyes wide open, his new shots were accepted. His passport finally renewed. Man, who knew online portals could discriminate so hard?
Man asked daughter to doodle on his passport to avoid fine. A man named Wang from Shanghai overstayed his visa in the US and asked his 6-year-old daughter to draw on his passport over the date of his overstayed visa. Perhaps it was because he'd heard of this other story where a man's 4-year-old son doodled on his dad's passport and got him stuck in Korea. Initially, Wang insisted that the passport, which now sported a collection of flowers, clouds, and a variety of fruit, was taken by his daughter and used as drawing paper unbeknownst to him. However, officials didn't believe him, and under pressure, Wang finally confessed that he'd asked his daughter to do him a favor and add all the decorations. Hopefully, his daughter still had fun.
5 Syrians headed to the U.S. with fake passports detained in Honduras. With 12,600 foreigners attempting to illegally enter Honduras in 2015, the country has tightened security at its ports, especially in the wake of the Paris terror attacks. 5 Syrians were arrested at Toncontin Airport in Honduras' capital late Tuesday night for attempting to enter the country using false documents. The men, who were carrying stolen Greek passports that were doctored to replace the photos with their own, traveled by air from Syria to Lebanon, then to Turkey, Brazil, Argentina, and Costa Rica, before eventually landing in Honduras. From there, they plan to go by land through Guatemala and Mexico to the United States, a 2,000-kilometer journey. Local authorities are working with Interpol to investigate, but say there are no signs of the men being linked to the Paris attacks, suggesting they may have just been looking to emigrate to the U.S.
South Korean plastic surgery is so good, you won't be able to pass immigration again. Wow, who's that sexy disembodied head belong to? Hey, get off my screen, lady, I was ogling some attractive chick. Wah, they're the same person. What witchcraft is this? But it's not witchcraft, it's South Korean plastic surgery, which the Daily Mail reports has caused problems for people trying to pass immigration in Chinese airports. Why, you ask? It's because that South Korean doctor can change your face, but he can't change your passport. Yeah, I wouldn't let her in either. In response, some clinics in South Korea are offering certificates describing their recent work. Whether they went in for double eyelids, pointier nose, shaved off jawbone, or face liposuction, they just don't look like their passport photos anymore. But don't forget, you can cut your face, but not your DNA.
American hipster sentenced to 6 years in North Korea labor camp for ripping up his visa. 24-year-old Matthew Todd Miller of Bakersfield, California, will spend the next 6 years doing hard labor at a North Korean prison camp. His crime? Ripping up his visa so he could spend some time at a North Korean prison camp. Matthew arrived in North Korea in April after spending the last 4 years teaching in South Korea. He reportedly tore up his visa as soon as he got there and asked to be arrested so that he could check out of prison. He got his wish and spent 4 months awaiting trial. On Sunday, he waived his right to a lawyer and received his formal sentence. 6 years at a forced labor camp. Matthew has now changed his mind about his little experiment. He says he's asked the U.S. government to intervene and has written a letter to President Obama. He hasn't gotten a response yet. But he's one of 3 Americans being detained in North Korea, and a U.S. National Security Council spokesman says that the White House is closely following all 3 cases. Matthew planned his trip with Yuri Tours, a travel agency that specializes in trips to North Korea. Yuri Tours says they weren't expecting him to behave like he did. You mean you didn't foresee your client tearing up his visa in hopes of getting arrested and spending the better part of a decade in a labor camp? Weird.
Man named Fook.beak upset about being banned from Facebook. 23-year-old Vietnamese-Australian man named, Fook.beak has been kicked off Facebook 3 times for having a Vietnamese name that sounds funny when pronounced phonetically. By the way, the last letters of each part of his name are silent. Fook has become famous for his name, but first he had to taste the bitter wrath of Facebook's name verification process. There are a handful of Facebook profiles with Fook.beak as their name, but we wonder how many of them are actually fake. Fook got so fed up with being kicked off of Facebook that he took a picture of his passport to prove the spelling of his legal name and posted it to his account back in January with a caption that says, in part, "Is it because I'm Asian? Is it?" Well, it's not so much because he's Asian, but rather the phonetic pronunciation of his name in English is "fuck that." After being banned several times, Fook is back on social media, and he's become the subject of lots of chuckles, garnering over 28,000 followers.
Entitled Doctor's Wife Bashes Airport Staff with U.S. Passport. This video has gone viral in Taiwan after a prominent plastic surgeon's wife lost her cool with staff at Taoyuan International Airport. Wang, aged 62, is a prominent and well-renowned plastic surgeon in Taiwan. His wife generally stays out of the limelight, but this past week it was her turn to catch the nation's gaze. Dr. and Mrs. Wang were meant to fly out on an international flight, but Dr. Wang began feeling ill a few hours before the flight. Unable to cancel their tickets at the last minute, the couple decided to still try to make the flight. After checking and passing through security, Dr. Wang began throwing up while he and his wife waited in the VIP lounge. The two decided to forego the flight and contacted airport staff about canceling their tickets and reclaiming their luggage. Airport staff then provided a wheelchair for Dr. Wang and helped the couple exit the secure area of the airport. Unfortunately, after 30 minutes of walking, Mrs. Wang lost her patience and began yelling at security staff. She even whipped out her U.S. passport and waved it around, telling staff they better be careful or else she was going to have them all fired. Mrs. Wang demanded to know what the holdup was and why her and her husband were still being kept waiting. Staff attempted to explain that they were still removing the couple's luggage from the plane, but Mrs. Wang wasn't having any of it and started demanding if they knew who she was. Yeah, we know. You're the internet's newest darling. Enjoy! Photographer's passport revoked, stopped from entering Syria. A 58-year-old Japanese photographer, Yuichi Sugimoto, has had his passport confiscated by Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs after he refused to obey the government by insisting he would travel to Turkey and then Syria. Sugimoto wants to document the war in Syria, but after the beheadings of 2 Japanese hostages in ISIS custody earlier this year, the government wants to avoid a repeat. Chief Cabinet Secretary Suga said the Japanese government confiscated Sugimoto's travel documents for his own protection, and government authorities had spoken with Sugimoto and issued 3 warnings to the photographer against going to Syria. Suga says that any Japanese national entering ISIS-occupied territory is putting themselves at great risk.
Czech politician creates the world's newest fake country. What does it take to create a new country? Can you just make a butt-ugly flag and declare yourself President of the Republic of my Buttistan? Evidently so. This dude right here found himself a tiny spot in between Croatia and Serbia, drew a flag, and declared himself president. Czech politician Vit Jedlička, or should I say President Jedlička, says he found a 3-square-mile plot of unclaimed land between the Croatian and Serbian border, and in mid-April 2015, he declared it the Free Republic of Liberland, population 1. Liberland's governing philosophy is encapsulated in its national motto, live and let live. Government services such as a fire department will operate on a voluntary basis, and the nation's eventual citizens will work out their own rates of taxation. The president of the world's newest fake nation says he's received thousands of citizenship applications, but it's not looking good for wannabe Liberlandiers, as Croatia said, "Ha!" when asked to recognize the micronation, and Serbia predictably said the land belongs to Serbia. Many of us would probably like to have Mia stands, but President Jedlička's predicament is a good reminder of a basic guideline for creating a nation. Flags are nice, but an army is nicer.
Idiot scam artist arrested after handing over his passport to his mark. Meet the dumbest scam artist we've ever come across, Cheng Wen. The 25-year-old reportedly used Chinese social media app WeChat to hook up with a college student in the central Taiwanese city of Taichung. When they met up sometime in May, Chung told the 21-year-old he was a construction foreman and asked to borrow roughly $120 as he urgently needed to pay his crew. The naive student, wanting to help, forked over the cash. But give a scam artist an inch and they'll take a light year. After the two spent a steamy night together in a motel, Chung next asked to borrow an additional sum of more than $1,200, promising to pay her back when he received money from his family. This time, however, Chung had the brilliant idea of putting his passport down as collateral, which no doubt came in handy when he disappeared without a trace and the girl, belatedly realizing she'd been had, called the cops. The idiot scammer has since been arrested and charged with deception.